Hey everybody, welcome to today's video where I'm going to show you how to change the fluid in your rear differential. Alright, so a quick note before I get started here. What I'm going to cover today is going to pretty much apply to just about every rear differential that you will come across. There will be a few minor differences here and there, and I'll do my best to note those along the way. Alright, so as far as tools, I have pretty much everything you need laid out right here. To start, we'll need a drain pan to drain all the old fluid into. You're going to want some shop towels in case you have any spillage. We're going to need the replacement fluid. That fluid is going to depend on the vehicle you have, and you're going to want to look in your owner's manual to find out what kind of fluid that is. If you don't have that, usually a quick internet search will tell you what you need. Also, to do with fluid, some vehicles have a limited slip differential, and if you have that, you're going to want to make sure you have an additive that's supposed to go with your fluid. The good news is a lot of aftermarket fluids also have this additive automatically included, so you might not have to worry about that. Alright, so some additional tools that we're going to need a ratchet and an appropriate extension and socket to remove the differential cover bolts. We're going to need a torque wrench to reinstall those, and we're going to need a gasket material to make a new gasket for the differential cover. Now some vehicles, you can go to the store and you can buy an actual gasket for your differential. In my case here, it's actually easier just to go ahead and make a new one, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this Permatex gasket maker that I bought. And last but not least, I have a plastic scraper there that you're going to have to scrape off the old gasket material from both the differential and the differential cover. I do not recommend using anything metal because you can gouge up the surfaces and cause leaks later. One difference that I wanted to point out between vehicles before we get started here is how the fill plug is configured. Some vehicles have a metal fill plug that's on the front side of the differential, and that's what we're going to see on this vehicle today. Other vehicles just have a rubber plug that's on the differential cover itself. Depending on what you have, it's going to affect what you need to remove that. Typically, the rubber plugs only need a flathead screwdriver to pop those out. The metal plugs, you're going to usually need either a 3/8 or 1/2 inch drive, ratchet, and extension, and that just inserts into the plug and you unscrew it. Especially in the case of the metal fill plugs, the first thing you want to do in this procedure is to make sure you can actually get that out. If by chance you won't be able to get that out and you've already drained all your old fluid out, you're going to be in a lot of trouble to get new fluid in there. So when you get started here, that's the first thing we're going to do. Alright, let's go ahead and get this done. Okay, so the fill plug that I was talking about is this one right here. So what we need to go ahead and do is go ahead and insert the extension into the fill plug and loosen it. And as you can see, this one here is coming right out. So we're going to be in good shape as far as being able to put fluid back in this. I'm going to pull this out all the way because I want to show you that these typically have a magnet embedded into the end of them. And so what you want to do is take a look at that and make sure that you clean off any sort of metal particles that are on that. For now, we're just going to go ahead and insert that back in and leave it there until later. Alright, so now that we've verified that we can remove the fill plug, we're going to go ahead and remove the differential cover. We're going to do that by removing the bolts that hold it on. We are going to leave this top center one in, but we're going to loosen it a little bit, and that will allow us to pry open the differential cover, let the fluid out without having the cover come off all the way. Alright, so like I said, we took out all the bolts except for the very top one, which we loosened. Now we're ready to go ahead and take a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to gently pry on the bottom of the differential cover to get it to separate from the differential. Alright, so now that we have the cover off, we're still going to want to give it some more time to go ahead and drain out. As you can see, the fluid's still draining out slowly. It's making its way out of the axle tubes, so we want to give it some time to come out all the way. While we're waiting for that, we can go ahead and take the differential cover and clean that up and get it ready for the new sealant. Alright, so what we can go ahead and do is go ahead and wipe this out, get some of that, you can see this grime and stuff that's inside of this, along with the old gasket material that's stuck on here. You can see that that sort of just peels right off. Go ahead and rip that off. If you don't want to get grease on your hands, I do recommend wearing some sort of protective gloves. You can even use our plastic scraper that I mentioned earlier to try to get some of that off. Then we can take some brake parts cleaner and spray that down a little bit, get some of the other residue off. Then lastly, we want to take the scraper and we want to make sure that we get any of the residual old sealant that's left off of there. We want this to be as smooth as possible with no residue left that could cause leaks later with the new sealant. As I said earlier, I definitely don't recommend using anything other than a plastic scraper. Okay, so we also want to clean off the surface of the rear differential. We can also spray lightly some of the brake parts cleaner in the rear differential, and that'll help rinse out some of the old differential fluid as well. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and put on the new sealant on the differential cover before we install it back on the differential. I recommend that you pay close attention to the instructions on the particular sealant that you buy. The sealant that I'm using here has me reinstall a differential cover immediately, finger tightening all the bolts afterwards. Depending on the sealant you're using, that might be a little bit different. Some of them require you to wait 10 or 15 minutes before you do that, but like I said, in this case I'm going to install the bolts finger tight immediately afterwards. Alright, so like I said, now we're going to go ahead and install the differential cover back on, but we're just going to do the bolts finger tight. I recommend starting with the top and bottommost bolts just to get it started and steady, and then go ahead and insert the rest of the bolts. You do want to move this around as little as possible as to not smear the new sealant, so just be careful with that. Now as we install and finger tighten the rest of the bolts, we want to do that just so we just start to see some of the new sealant squeeze out around the differential cover. And I also recommend doing this in sort of a crisscross pattern. Okay, so the sealant that I'm using says to go ahead and wait about an hour before torquing this down to spec. So once I've waited that long, I'll go ahead and torque these down. Torque spec on these bolts is going to vary depending on the vehicle, so I recommend doing another internet search to see if you can find the exact torque values you need, but typically 25 to 35 foot-pounds would be sufficient. Okay, so now that we've waited, we can go ahead and torque these down. Like I said before, we're going to use a crisscross pattern. Okay, so the only thing we have left to do now is to go ahead and put the fluid back in it. However, the sealant that I use requires a setup time of 24 hours before adding the fluid. Your results may vary depending on the sealant that you decided to use. If having your vehicle down for a full day like this is a problem, I would definitely take a look at some different sealants out there and see if you can find one that's compatible with doing a rear differential job like this that doesn't have quite so long of a wait time. Myself, this is a third vehicle, so it's not really a big deal if it's down for a day, but I can definitely understand that if this is your daily driver, it would be highly inconvenient for the vehicle to be down for an entire day like that. Anyways, I'll go ahead and pick this up as soon as I can. Luckily for you, that'll be in the next couple of seconds. Alright, so now that we've waited, we're ready to go ahead and put the new fluid in. Go ahead and pull the fill plug out that I took out earlier. And like I mentioned, there's a magnet usually on the end of these. If you haven't already cleaned that off, go ahead and clean it off. And for now, just set it aside. Okay, so now we're going to take the hose for our hand pump that's attached to our fluid bottle. Go ahead and insert that into the hole. And then we're going to slowly pump in the new fluid. We're going to pump this in until we start to see some of the fluid come out of the fill hole. we go. We're starting to see some come out of there now. So go ahead and pull the hose back out. You can see some of that dripping out. And we'll just go ahead and reinstall the fill plug. Alright everybody, that's it. We're all finished. If you liked today's video, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you did. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.